Welcome to SKOL Search, a series right here on Vikings First and SKOL, brought to you by Tyler Forness and the Real Forno Show. SKOL Search is all about getting you ready for the 2026 NFL Draft by diving deep into the prospects the Vikings just might target. Here are 3 of those new prospects.
Welcome back to SKOL Search. I'm your host, Tyler Forness, and please, if you really like all this NFL draft content, let me know in the comments and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to talk a lot about defensive tackles here today, and it's a really important position for a multitude of reasons. Earlier in February, I had JP Acosta of CBS Sports on, where we spent an hour talking about the difference between pass rush and run defense when it comes to projecting into the National Football League. And when it comes to this group specifically, the defensive linemen, I highly recommend you go back and watch that, as we really got into the weeds on a lot of different elements. Now, this group is an interesting one because there really is no alpha dog. There's no top 5 pick. There's no, this dude is a can't miss player. And we often have at least one of those in every class. Jalen Carter a couple years ago was one of those players, but some of the off the field issues with him and the car accident I believe that he was involved in, allegedly, those factors ended up knocking him down. And the Eagles got him at 9th overall. And of course, the Eagles got him at 9th overall. But that's what you're kind of looking at here. You're not looking at a guy like Jalen Carter. You're looking at the next tier below. Think of Javon Kinlaw when he came out of the draft in 2020, like around that 15 range. That's where we're going to start seeing some of these guys. And due to the strength of this class, it may be a little bit higher than that where some of them go, but not because they necessarily deserve to go, but just because this isn't a very good class. And earlier this year, when we saw the Seattle Seahawks win the Super Bowl, it was really impressive because their defensive line was just so fortified and strong that they were able to attack in multiple different ways. That is going to be copied by a lot of people. You're going to want defensive linemen who can get upfield with the pass rush, but are very stout against the run. And those guys are very hard to find. And when you do find them, you need to draft them and or pay them. On the other side of the ball, Milton Williams was awesome for the Patriots this year, but they had to give him $26 million a year on average in order to come to New England. That was a big factor. And when you have the ability to get one of those guys, you have to find a way to make it happen. And the Minnesota Vikings pick 18th overall. They may not have a chance at any of these players just due to the draft class, positional value, and the fact that, hey, 17 other teams may end up taking these guys. But the 3 that are projected to go in the first round consistently are ones we're going to talk about today. Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, and Kayden McDonald. Let's start with Caleb Banks because, look, I'm going to be honest. Florida guy. Yeah. As I move the wrong side of my hair because I'm looking at myself in the camera. And, of course, your right and your left don't exactly mesh. But he's a very interesting player. He's 6'6", 330 pounds. Not only is he big, he's long, over 35-inch arms. And I am a big guy, too. I am also 6'6" and 330 pounds. Main difference between me and Caleb Banks, he's really athletic. I'm just kind of fat. But I got to tell you, standing next to him and watching him perform at the Senior Bowl really strengthened a lot of what you see on film. And that's the big thing with the Senior Bowl. You want to use it contextually. You want to ensure that, hey, this guy can actually do these things on film. And that's what you're looking for when you're watching some of the drills up front. You want to see the movement skills. You want to see the ability to enhance pass rush moves. Make no mistake about it, he did a great job. He dominated Senior Bowl practices day 2 and 3. And the first practice that he wasn't necessarily as good at was because he was doing some of the things you would see in games, but you wouldn't see in a setting like that. Where, hey, I didn't win with my first move, so I'm going to hold him up front, and I'm going to peek, and I'm going to shed, and then I'm going to back the ball down. He was trying to do that. But in a one-on-one drill, you need to just throw a bunch of moves, and you need to try and get to the quarterback. After day 1, somebody had a conversation with him. That completely changed day 2 and 3, and he was arguably the best player in Mobile on those 2 days. Now, when you look at his film, there are some really interesting things. It's not just about the film. It's about what the film represents. And sometimes he's just not on the field. So let's take a look. He was at Louisville for a couple of years, and then he was at Florida. A multitude of missed games for Caleb Banks. And I'm pulling up because Pro Football Focus has you'd have to go individually per year, but you played 1 game as a freshman, 6 games as a junior, 12 in 23, 12 in 24, and then just 3 games last year. There are a lot of different reasons why. And this past year specifically was a foot injury. He suffered that foot injury in the summer, missed a bunch of fall camp, came back in week 3, and then re-injured it. I believe it was a Liz Frank. I am not 100% sure on that. The reporting has been kind of vague, as it oftentimes is with college football injuries. But he suffered a foot injury. I believe he also had surgery. And he came back for the final 2 games when he didn't have to. He wanted to play with his teammates. And that was one thing that all of the Florida guys at the Senior Bowl really relayed. Like, hey, a lot of noise with surrounding Billy Napier and the squad last year. How did you guys stick together and nothing wavered on the field? You guys consistently played hard and it didn't feel like anything got to you. How did you prevent that? And they all said the same thing. There was a brotherhood. They loved each other. They loved Napier too, but when Napier was gone, they had to find that continuity, and they did a great job of it. Now, we can talk all about some of the nuances, and with Caleb Banks, injuries are going to be a huge thing because foot injuries especially, they are hard to deal with when you are 330 pounds. It's different if you have a guy who's about 200 pounds. There's not as much stress on the actual appendage itself. And we saw that this past year with Christian Darrisaw, where he came back from that torn ACL, and all of a sudden, it feels like, hey, we're 10.5 months removed and he's still not playing? What's going on? Well, he weighs 320 pounds. That matters, and that's a factor here because it's more stress on the joint, meaning that it takes longer to heal. And that's a big thing with a guy like Darrisaw. And Banks is going to be a very similar way because they are very similar-sized people. Now, looking over at what Banks is good at, I think it's a really, really exciting profile. And that's a big thing. And I want to know, when I do these grades, I don't account for injuries. Injuries to me are a separate being. These are film grades. When we stack boards and stuff, then we can, hey, red flag for injuries. I will do bonus points, plus and minus, just because, hey, outside of the film, there are extenuating circumstances. Like, hey, maybe you just tested like a freak after he lost some weight. Maybe there's some injury stuff. Maybe there's some off the field character concerns that we need to be considerate of and be like, hey, maybe I should dock this guy a round or 2 because I just don't want to take that risk super high. The character concerns that were surrounding James Pierce Jr. last year ended up coming to fruition, and now he's facing multiple felony charges for an incident that happened right before the Super Bowl. Not exactly a great thing, but mostly my grades are film grades. And I think that's a really important caveat here. But let's start with the positives with Banks. That size is bonkers, and he does a fantastic job of using it. One thing I asked him with his arm length, because 35-inch arms is great when you're an edge rusher. It's great when you're a tackle because there is a lot of space in between you and the pass rusher when you're that offensive lineman, and then you have to engage. Well, that speed and momentum can matter. And if you have long enough arms, you can just pop them in the chest, drive them back, and get to the quarterback easily. Or if you're an offensive lineman, you can use that length to engage contact first and prevent them from even making a move. But when you're on the defensive line, you're making contact almost immediately. Having long arms isn't always a benefit. And Banks gave a really good answer. He's like, well, sometimes I will just keep the offensive lineman at bay and I'll peek and I'll be able to kind of throw them and do the 2-gap thing. Hold them and then go to either side, and then that really helps in the run game as well. I like the fact that he knows how to use it, and he understands that it can be a detriment too, because that's the big thing. It's not always about being a positive element. It's a detriment because you have to be able to do all of those little nuanced things. And the fact that he is able to 2-gap, play contain, and keep those guys away is really impressive. But it also pairs really well with some of the other factors here. He's armed with a bevy of pass rush moves. He kind of uses them with variety. He knows how to penetrate really quickly. He can rip. He doesn't really spin, but he can swim. He can cross chop. A lot of nuance to his pass rush repertoire, which is something you want to see from a guy who's going to be 23 on draft day. Banks understands how to throw them, when to throw them, and how to mix them up. You're never going to see a 335-pound guy swim. That would be great. I would love to see a big boy swim move on a center, but he understands how to use his quickness to his advantage and then use his hands and arms to maximize it. He had a rep against Jake Slaughter where he just whipped him to the inside, and Slaughter's just trying to get to that outside shoulder and just keep him at bay. He just rips, boom, done. Rep is over. And that is a huge impact in how to maximize some of this stuff with Caleb Banks. You got to get that penetration, but then when you get it, you have to maximize it by using those moves. You can't just be quick off the ball. You have to be able to counter whatever they throw at you as a blocker. And Banks understands how to do that. So it's not just the pass rush moves and stuff. That explosive first step is tremendous. And every so often, you just have a rare explosive first step. Guys like Warren Sapp had a great first step. And Sapp was a big, big boy. You need to have a way to get to the quarterback. And he had 4.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss as a redshirt junior in 2023. And it looked like he was going to be one of the best prospects in 2024 after that 2025 season. I got to tell you, if you weren't for that injury, I think we'd have Banks firmly in the top 10 without question, because we'd have a full year of him just being able to dominate offensive linemen. And he did a great job over the course of the 2025 season in the 3 games he played, getting penetration, making offensive linemen look silly, and attacking the quarterback. And it's not just about attacking the quarterback. When it's a run play, he's getting that kind of penetration too. The Gators just weren't able to fix some of those issues. And by fix, I mean, once he would get penetration, nobody was able to kind of pick up the slack, which is a big part of playing linebacker. Hey, defensive line is going to give you opportunities. Hey, I'm going to penetrate. I'm going to just absolutely disrupt the play. Now you got to go clean up. And sometimes that defensive lineman can get the tackle, but it's not always. Getting disruption is just as important more often than not than actually making the tackle. And when you have Banks, who's a consistent disruptor, keep doing it. And then you have to have guys behind him. Well, if he comes to the Minnesota Vikings, he's going to have those guys behind him. I like what I see. I always want to have a disruptor. And being one that's that big, can 2-gap, you have a nose tackle who can play nose, who can kick out to 3-tech. You could probably have him play 5 or 4-eye as well. Those things matter. And it's going to help when you don't have to take that guy off the field when it's a pass rush down. I love that. I love the fact that, hey, this guy does not ever have to come off the field. You're going to take him off the field. You're going to give him time off. You're not going to play him more than 60, 70% of the snaps. But when he's on the field, he's going to be really good and explosive for you. That's exactly what I want to see. The one thing that I really like about Banks' game that we haven't mentioned yet, strength. The only time that he really gets blown off the ball, and it's a little more often than it should happen, and we'll talk about one of the negatives, which is his pad level's not great because he's 6'6". But if he gets stood up a little bit and he gets knocked from the shoulder, you can get him to the ground. But if it's just a one-on-one battle, you're not popping him. He's really strong at the point of attack. He's got a really sturdy frame, and you have to take him out from the side, which you don't want to see happen at all with a guy who's going to play nose tackle. But when it comes to Banks, you're going to feel a little bit more okay with it because of some of those other factors that we talked about. If you keep that pad level low, you're not going to pop him like that. But let's transition over to the negatives. Pad level. You can't be stood up that easily. And guess what? Low man wins. If it's a 6 foot, 295-pound center, they can beat you. There's a rep of Garrett Bradbury against Jordan Davis from 2023 where he just stood him up. And Davis is a much bigger, stronger player, but he lost the leverage battle. And you need to be able to keep that pad level low enough so they can't just jack you up. Banks needs to work on that. And it's something that's probably going to factor in for him his entire career because he's 6'6", playing defensive tackle. That's always going to be there in some way, shape, or form. But you can work more on keeping your butt lowered and keeping those knees bent and driving forward then up. Like, that's why you have the sleds, because you have to get under and then jack them up. I think Banks needs to work on that first and foremost. I think when it comes to the pass rush, he does a really good job of attacking initially, but he needs to work on the counters. Once you get them jacked up, what are you going to do next? When they stop you on that initial move, how are you going to respond? And that was something we didn't see on day 1 of the Senior Bowl, but day 2 and 3 we did. When that rip move doesn't work, can you find a way to then, hey, just chop it and then maybe swim to the other side? Can you use a long arm? Can you do something else? Because that counter package is something he needs to work on as well. They're just not there. They're not there like they should be. And especially for guys 23, are you going to be able to develop that enough to where it's a consistent for you? I think so, because the way the Florida Gators played, he didn't really get a ton of true pass rush reps. When we kind of take a look back, his pass rush reps in college were only 513, and in 2024, 233. We're not exactly talking about a massive sample size here. And we need to kind of work on getting him some of those elements if you really want to maximize him and make him the most successful. The last thing, we already talked about it, injuries. Can you stay healthy? Yeah, it's really tough because the guy who's often injured in college may not get injured at all in the NFL, or as we've seen with J.J. McCarthy, one minor hamstring injury and a low ankle sprain that he didn't miss any time with. Well, now he's missed 25 out of his first 35 eligible games. Not exactly great, right? But it's also unpredictable. What is Caleb Banks' health? And is that size going to play a big factor? I think it very well could. And that in itself is a scary thought. Because if you can't keep Caleb Banks healthy, is he going to be worth a first-round pick? There are going to be some teams that don't have him as a first-round pick for that exact reason. Overall, I do. 87.6 grade. I love Caleb Banks. He did not make the All-Forno team. I try not to have any first-round picks if I can, but sometimes one will get on there. Really, really good football player. And I think you can maximize what he brings to the table, and you can use him in a bevy of different ways, which is perfect for Brian Flores' defense, because if you bring in a true nose later in the draft, say a Tim Keenan, hey, Banks, go play 4-eye. Let's have some fun. And then he can be a mismatch weapon that way. Plus, he has a really funny rep against Kentucky, where he kind of did drop back into coverage. It wasn't quite as good as the Deion Walker rep where he forced the interception, but it's a good one. Banks is a really good football player, and he's somebody that I would want to take a chance on. But you got to be comfortable with the medicals. Is something going to pop up? Injury that didn't heal right? Maybe a degenerative thing because of an injury that happened earlier? We'll find out probably at the combine or shortly after, but make no mistake about it. Based on the film, I want this guy on my team. We had the conversation about Caleb Banks, and now comes the other bona fide first-round talent at defensive tackle, and that's Peter Woods from Clemson. Going into the year, Woods was viewed as a top 5 pick. And we've seen that time and time again, where guys who are projected to be top picks don't end up living up to the hype. Some of them end up living up to the hype. One element that is going to be really interesting to kind of watch from the perspective of, hey, is this guy going to be really good, or is this guy just going to fall off the face of the earth? You have to look at how they play the year before they enter the draft. And Woods is entering the draft not after putting up his best year. We saw quarterback Drew Aller of Penn State has suffered a season-ending leg injury, and he was projected to go top 5 because of all the raw tools and talent, but he was never able to put it together with any form of consistency. And now there's talk maybe he could be undrafted, but he probably finds his way to get drafted round 4 or 5 just because, hey, I can fix him. That's what coaches are supposed to think, and that's why general managers are there to override the coaches, be like, no, this dude ain't fixable. You just believe you can fix anybody because that's your job. And looking at it from that perspective, Woods is a fascinating player to watch because, one, Clemson, the way they use their defensive linemen, they do a ton of twists and stunts, and that can really cloud the evaluation because you're not getting a ton of really true one-on-one reps. But it does show you how well they can really perform in a situation where they're going to use a lot of twists and stunts. To me, that's a really big factor here with Peter Woods because watching him year over year, you can see that those twists and stunts really kind of hindered him a little bit. Let me explain that. There's a belief out there when you do a lot of twists and stunts that it can really help you maximize pressure. And the Vikings did that in 2024, where they didn't really have a lot in the interior. So they would twist and stunt a lot in order to maximize their opportunities because it's almost like deception. using that deception can maximize it. Well, Clemson just kind of had dudes on the defensive line, but they were still doing a lot of those twists and stunts. And when you look at Woods, he's a great crasher. So he can just absolutely bum rush an offensive lineman and then have a looper come behind him on his butt and be able to go get the quarterback. But where things get really interesting is I like him just as a pass rusher. So let's talk about Woods. I like him a lot. He's an explosive athlete. When you look at Woods' size, he is about 6'3", 310, and he just looks like a prototypical 3-technique tackle. And he's really quick off the ball. He gets off the ball using like a really powerful lower half where he just kind of uses his hips and powers forward to be able to generate that kind of explosiveness. And it's really good. I love watching him really get off the ball and make an impact that way. And there's a lot to like about what he can do from that perspective. And being able to get off the ball with that kind of powerful lower half is a really important factor when you're trying to generate pass rush. You want to get penetration. Penetration and pressure is king. And even in the run game, being able to get penetration quickly is a good thing. And he uses that explosiveness well with his pass rush arsenal. He can throw a lot of different moves. He does a rip really well. He understands how to use his hands and be able to keep offensive linemen from really getting into his chest. I think he's got a lot of potential growth in those areas too, because of how they kind of use those stunts. You're not necessarily asking him to do a lot of like looping himself, but he can do it. I think the growth potential with this pass rush is really important, especially because we have to ask a lot of questions about 24 to 25. So 24 on 221 pass rush reps, he had 20 pressures and 3 sacks per Pro Football Focus. He went from 395 to 562 total snaps from year over year, had 363 pass rush reps in 25 with 14 pressures. His PFF grade also dropped significantly in the pass rush, nearly 9 full points. What happened? I think when you look at what Woods, a lot of it just has to do with teams were getting better around him, and the Clemson team just was not. I also think he had a little bit of a down year. It felt, and it's really hard to say it without like burying the guy because it's really hard to know effort, but it looked like effort just wasn't there. It looked like he did not put in the requisite amount of effort you want to see from a player of this caliber. And to me, that's a problem. I wanted to see more. We all wanted to see more, and we didn't get it. And that's why he could end up falling late first round. But he could also go in the teens, maybe even top 10, because he just has a lot of pluses to his game. He doesn't get blown off the ball easily. 310 pounds. A lot of 3 techniques you're seeing come in like 285, 290, 295, or even a Kalijah Kancey, 270 pounds. You can blow those guys off the ball because they just don't have that core strength profile. Well, guess what? Woods is built like a tree. You're going to have that core strength profile with his game, and that's going to be a huge factor in maximizing what he's able to do. I think it's an absolute plus for whoever wants to take him, and you can do a lot of really good things on an overall level. He also deconstructs blocks well in the run game, keeps his eyes up, throws blockers off the spot, and has a power profile to his name where he can do a lot of different things, and he's not just a designated pass rusher. This is the guy that you can have play on all 3 downs. And I think that separates him from other 3 techniques where you can have him play against the run, and he can hold up against blocks. You can have him rush the passer. And then on those early downs where they do rush the passer, boom, you have a built-in guy, and you're not just using him to stop the run. Kind of like how the Vikings were trotting out Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery 24, and then 25, you had the emergence of Jalen Redmond, Jonathan Allen, and Javon Hargrave. Now, some of the things that could be a deterrent is kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Caleb Banks. He has short arms. And when you have short arms, that can create some issues, especially when you're doing twists and stunts. It's not going to create as many issues when you're just going forward. And that might be the path forward for Woods because he does not have the arm length to be able to really attack the way you would like to see other players. But because you're going straight forward, that can take an impact as well. And that quickness off the ball and being able to get into the offensive lineman's chest early, it prevents arm length issues. Those things matter. So your mileage is going to vary if that arm length is an actual problem, and it depends on how you're going to use him too. I don't like his counter package. I think he's got a really good pass rush repertoire when he decides, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that. But if he has to throw a secondary move after that first move, that's where he needs development. And a lot of these guys need that development too, because too often you see players just trying to win because I'm a better athlete than you. A lot of the top edge rushers coming out of high school, like, I'm just better than you. Like, you're facing insurance salesmen, and you do so in the college level too. But when you look at a guy like Woods, I would like to see a little more development there. He also gets a little too aggressive at times when he's penetrating. And sometimes getting that penetration getting penetration is always a good thing, but you can make it a negative by just over penetrating or being a little too over explosive, and over eager is probably the best way to frame it. And if you're over eager, that can cause cutbacks. And then that's where you can absolutely get decimated. I think that in itself should be honed in a little bit. You don't want to curb it, but you want to maximize it. You want to make it more impactful and more worthwhile. That's where I think Woods could earn a little bit more. Overall, Woods barely got a first round grade for me. I think if this were the 2024 version that we saw again in 25, I think he would rank higher than Banks. But that's not the player we got. We have to go with what we have. Now, he could be better than his 2025 tape, and there could be reasons for it that we're just not aware of. But if that reason is he just kind of checked out, like it felt watching the film, that's a big red flag. Why do you check out, and how do you know that's not going to happen again? These are questions you have to answer, and these are questions you have to figure out throughout the course of learning about this player and making sure that you want to take him in the first round. But the player itself, there is a huge potential for him to take a massive step and become one of the better defensive tackles in the National Football League. We've talked about two explosive pass rushers that have really good size. Now, well, we got to change it up a bit. We have to talk about a run stuffer. Yes, that's right, a nose tackle, and his name is Kayden McDonald from Ohio State. I like Kayden McDonald. I think he's a good player, but there's a difference between being a good player and being somebody that I can trust long-term as a pass rusher. And that is the crux of this whole conversation. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, you need to go back and watch the episode I did with JP Acosta talking about D-line, talking about quantifying pass rush and run defense when it comes to NFL draft stock, because it's a huge part of this conversation. Kayden McDonald's a one-trick pony, but he's really good at that one trick, and it's stopping the run. He is a 6'3", 326-pound nose tackle, but he doesn't look like old-school nose tackles. He doesn't look like Keith Traylor or Ted Washington. He's a pretty well put together human, kind of similar to Caleb Banks, where they're just big, but it's not like they're fat. They're just big. And there's no like massive belly or anything like that for McDonald, and he's just a very stout player. You have to move this guy with a forklift. And that's a huge factor here for this Minnesota Vikings team. If you can't move that guy, that's going to make a massive difference in stopping the run. Plus, when it comes to other elements of it, you have this Minnesota Vikings team where if you had a nose tackle, your run defense would probably be better. The run defense really wasn't that bad. They were second in the NFL in rushes against. So they had the second most rushes against. But they were also fifth best in yards per carry average allowed while being 20th in yards allowed total. They were pretty effective against the run. People just kept running the football. And there were a couple anomaly games, one of them especially being the Atlanta Falcons. And having a Kayden McDonald would have been great. Maybe you shouldn't have traded Harrison Phillips. But the bet that they made, and I think they were right to make it, and I think that the results were pretty much right too. If the offense would have played well, none of this is really a conversation, in my opinion. But if you had Harrison Phillips, your run defense is so much stronger. But that's going to take away from some of your pass defense. Because remember, pass defense was good, but they were 28th in the league in yards allowed. Why? Because they were so good at stopping the run, being second in the league. So if you add McDonald, that's going to create some interesting issues. But we have to start with the fact that he can't rush the passer. This is Jonathan Bullard when it comes to getting a pass rush. He's going to push the pocket. He did log 14 pressures as a pass rusher, but remember, pressures are so relative. Pressures only matter in a certain context. They have to come in a certain amount of time, and you have to be able to not only generate the pressure in a quick amount of time, but you have to be able to make an impact. That matters. And McDonald, he is not getting quick pressures, and when he does, it's because he's penetrating because it's run defense. He does not have a really big repertoire, and quite frankly, the best way to rush the passers is be by bigger, faster, stronger. He's going to be bigger and stronger than a lot of people he faces, but he's not quick, and that's a problem. He's not going to be... You don't have pass rush aptitude really with this guy. So how high do you take him? Well, let's talk about some other elements to his game. He is an insanely powerful athlete. You can't displace him. Even against double teams where somebody comes at him from the side, he's able to hold up incredibly well and just put his foot in the ground. He's immovable. Being immovable at the college level is huge because it means it's going to be incredibly hard to move you at the NFL level. That, to me, is really exciting. I love the fact that you see a nose tackle that just is stout. He's got really good pop in his hands. He can knock offensive linemen back on first contact, and being able to have that really good pop in the hands is awesome to see. And I like what I see from him from a run defense standpoint. I think he's tremendous, but it all comes back to the pass. But let's talk about some more of the positives. So one thing when you're a nose tackle is you're either a one gap or a two gap kind of guy. If you're a one gap kind of guy, you're going to be a one technique in a 4-3. You can two gap, you're going to play in a 3-4. You're going to be able to play in those odd fronts and maximize what you can do, because the Vikings love to kind of shoot gaps in run defense and being able to still have their nickel capabilities. Shout out JP Acosta for kind of laying it out there so eloquently on that episode of the Real Forno Show. But they like to shoot gaps in order to help them stop the run. Being able to do that helps alleviate the fact that you don't even need a nose tackle. Well, what McDonald can do is he can two gap, and he can sit there and he can hold you at bay, peek, shed, and he can two gap. He can play gap and a half. He can also just do a single gap. You can have him do anything you want from a run stuffing standpoint. I think he's a tremendous run stuffer, but how much value does that hold? That's the key. The one negative, other than just not having pass rush powers, that I kind of identified, I think his pad level pops up a little bit. He's 6'3", so it's bound to happen. But I'd like to see him work on keeping that pad level down a little bit. And if you can do that, Kayden McDonald's a really, really good football player. I love what he brings to the table, but I only gave him an 82, which is a mid to late second round grade. If you take him in the first round, I get it, because you think he's a first round player in what he does really well. And you're okay that he doesn't give you the other elements. This game is changing a lot. And because it's changing, you can potentially get a really good player from this perspective. Would I want to make that move? No. I don't think I would want to take a 2-down only player in the first round when I'm not getting premium value out of it. That's kind of the conversation we have with running back too, right? But I think guys like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs have shifted the narrative a little bit to where if you have an elite running back, like a truly elite prospect, just take the guy. And Kayden McDonald, you can make an argument that he's truly elite at what he's being asked to do. So what should the Vikings do here? Should they take him? I wouldn't. But if they do, I'd get it. Thank you for watching SKOL Search here on Vikings First and SKOL. I'm Tyler Forness, SKOL Vikings.
All right, Vikings fans, that's a wrap on this episode of SKOL Search, brought to you by Vikings First and SKOL, partnered with the Fans First Sports Network. We've dived deep into draft prospects today, and I hope you're as excited as we were about bringing what the future holds for our purple and gold. If you enjoyed the breakdown, let's be honest, how could you not? Do us a huge favor. Smash that like button to show your support. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications on all our upcoming SKOL Search drops, Real Forno shows, 2-0 bloggers, and more. We're building this community for fans like you. Join the conversation in the comments, share with your fellow SKOL Nation members, and let's keep the momentum going into the offseason. Until next time, SKOL Vikings!